Okay, let's unpack this. India is gearing up for its next national census, and there's something pretty big happening.
Yeah, a major shift, right.
For the first time in, well, decades, it really looks like caste is going to be included in the count.
Which is huge news, definitely stirring things up.
Absolutely. So for this deep dive, we really want to get under the skin of this decision. Explore the history, the context, what might happen next.
And some of the maybe surprising details along the way.
Exactly. It pulls together so many threads, doesn't it?
Mm.
History, social justice, affirmative action policy.
Oh, definitely. And let's be honest, politics too. Real political calculations centered around, well, just counting people.
It seems simple on the surface, but it's anything but. So to get a handle on it, we've looked at recent news reports, obviously, but also this really useful survey note.
Yeah, that note gives a great long view, the history, where we are now, and some thoughts on the future outlook.
So what's our mission here? What are we trying to get to the bottom of?
I think we need to trace it back. Look at the history of these caste censuses in India.
Right.
Understand why they stopped doing it, after independence.
Okay.
Then look at what's been happening recently with states doing their own surveys.
Like Bihar, Karnataka.
Exactly. And then, of course, this big announcement from the central government. Why now? And critically, what are the arguments, for and against doing this?
Got it. So let's start way back. Counting by caste, it wasn't invented yesterday in India, was it?
No, not at all. This goes right back to the British colonial period. They ran systematic caste censuses from 1872 right up to 1931.
And why were the British doing it? What was their goal?
Mostly administrative and, well, fiscal reasons. They needed to categorize Indian society to govern it, collect taxes more efficiently, basically get things organized for their own purposes.
So less about understanding Indian society on its own terms and more about making it easier to rule.
Pretty much. I mean, some scholars argue it really reflected British administrative needs more than the messy reality of Indian social life. Herbert Risley's 1901 census is a key one here. It really tried to formalize classifications based on caste and race.
It must have caused some issues.
Oh, yeah. It faced opposition. Many caste groups felt they were being pigeonholed or misrepresented. It sort of solidified social stereotypes, which wasn't exactly helpful, even if it served the colonial administration's need for neat boxes.
Right. These neat boxes that maybe didn't fit reality. And I read somewhere the 1911 census was important, too.
That's right. It was significant because it kind of brought the untouchables, as they were then termed, into the national political discussion for the first time in this way.
Ah, okay.
And that data was really foundational for Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's work advocating for representation for these groups.
I see.
Then the last big one under the British in 1931 counted something like 4,147 castes.
Wow, over 4,000.
Yeah, a huge number.
Okay.
So these colonial tools, they also, maybe inadvertently, provided data for later social justice movements.
Okay, fascinating. Let's jump forward then. Independence arrives, and there's a conscious decision not to continue this comprehensive caste counting. Why the change?
Well, after independence, Jawaharlal Nehru's government basically decided, starting with the 1951 census, to stop counting everyone by caste.
And the thinking was?
The main goal was national unity, building a modern, secular India. The idea was that focusing on caste was divisive, a colonial hangover, something to be left behind.
So prioritize unity over acknowledging the existing divisions. Trying to build a casteless society, perhaps?
That was the aspiration, yes. The focus shifted to economic development, social progress. Those were seen as the priorities.
But they didn't stop counting all caste categories, did they?
No, that's crucial. They continued collecting data specifically for scheduled castes, SCs, and scheduled tribes, STs.
Why those groups?
Because the Constitution itself mandated it. It was necessary for implementing affirmative action policies, reservations for these historically disadvantaged groups.
Huh.
But for other castes, the general population, that detailed breakdown stopped. And later governments pretty much stuck to that policy.
But that approach faced criticism over time, right?
Oh.
This sort of caste blindness.
It did. Critics argued that by not collecting the data, the government couldn't really see or address the inequalities that continued to exist among other caste groups, especially the OBCs, the other backward classes.
Like, you can't fix a problem if you pretend it's not there, or at least if you don't measure it.
Exactly, which just sort of leads us to the next attempt, the 2011 socio-economic and caste census, the SECC.
Right, the SECC 2011. What was the plan with that one?
So the UPA government launched that. The idea was to gather socioeconomic data, including caste, mainly to target welfare programs better, go beyond just counting heads, look at people's actual living conditions linked to caste.
Sounds sensible in theory,
Mhm.
but I seem to recall it didn't go smoothly.
No, it really didn't. The caste data collected in 2011, well, it was never officially released, never really
Why
used.
not? What went wrong?
Big concerns about accuracy and consistency. Just imagine, they ended up with something like 4.6 million different variations in how people reported their caste names.
4.6 million. How is that even possible?
Well, a lot of it was down to self-reporting without clear standardized categories.
Mm.
Different spellings, local variations, subcaste names. It was a methodological nightmare, frankly.
Wow. So what happened to all that raw data? Did they just scrap it?
They handed it over to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. They set up an expert group to try and classify it, make sense of it.
Yeah.
That group's report was never made public. Later on, the government officially said the data was flawed and essentially unusable.
So a huge effort, but ultimately not successful.
It really highlighted just how difficult conducting a caste census is in India. With its incredible diversity, the logistical and methodological hurdles are immense.
Okay, so after that experience, maybe it's not surprising that the action shifted to the state level for a while. We saw states deciding to do their own surveys.
Exactly. The need for updated data didn't go away, so some states took the initiative. Bihar is a prime example.
Tell us about Bihar. What do they find?
In 2023, they conducted their survey. The big headline finding was that OBCs and EBCs, other backward classes and extremely backward classes together, make up a huge chunk of the population, 63.14%.
Over 63%. That's a clear majority.
Definitely. While the general castes were about 15.5%, and it wasn't cheap either, cost nearly 5 billion rupees.
And I remember this stirred up quite a bit of controversy and legal action.
Oh, yes. There were legal challenges questioning if the state even had the authority to do it. The Patna High Court eventually said yes, it was valid, but the whole thing is still pending before the Supreme Court.
Right. And then there was Karnataka. They did one earlier, didn't they?
They did, way back in 2015. But the report only got submitted to the state cabinet very recently in April 2025.
And that one caused ripples too, I gather.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very controversial findings. Dominant communities there, the Lingayats, Brokaligas, Brahmins, they're contesting the numbers, saying they've been undercounted. And the report apparently recommends significantly increasing reservations for backward classes based on its findings.
So these state surveys are definitely challenging the status quo and existing perceptions. What about Telangana?
They also did one, socio-economic, educational, employment, political, and caste survey in 2024-25.
And their findings?
They found that backward classes make up 56.33% of their population.
Another state showing a majority for backward classes.
Yes. And based on that, the Telangana government has already announced a 42% reservation for BCs in local body elections. So you see this pattern: states gathering data and then acting on it, often related to reservations.
Which really sets the stage for the big one. The central government's announcement in April 2025, including caste in the national census.
Yeah.
That feels like a watershed moment.
It really is a complete reversal of that post-independence policy we talked about. Decades of, well, not doing this kind of comprehensive count.
Who announced it?
The information minister, Ashwini Vaishnaw, on April 30th. He framed it as a commitment to societal values and transparency.
But everyone expects this will lead to
Increased demands for reservations, especially for OBCs, based on potentially updated population figures.
And the timing. Just before state elections in Bihar, where caste politics are always intense, hard not to see a political dimension there.
Very hard to ignore, yes. Bihar goes to the polls soon, and this is a major issue there.
What were the immediate reactions?
Mixed, as you'd expect. Opposition leader Rahul Gandhi welcomed it, but claimed it was due to pressure from the opposition. While Home Minister Amit Shah hailed it as historic, saying it would empower backward sections. So different political framing.
And how are they planning to actually do it this time, given the problems in 2011?
The plan is for it to be largely digital. There's talk of using a mobile app, possibly with a preset drop-down directory of castes to, try and avoid those millions of variations from 2011.
A digital census. It's a big step.
It is. The software is apparently being tested now. And of course, it means retraining all the census enumerators for this new digital process and the caste question specifically.
Okay, so we've got the history, the state surveys, the big announcement. Let's dig into the core debate now. the arguments for doing a caste census and the arguments against it. What are the main points on the pro side?
Well, proponents argue it's absolutely vital for social justice. You need accurate, granular data to design fair policies, allocate resources equitably.
Right. You can't target help effectively if you don't know who needs it and where they are.
Exactly. And it's crucial for evaluating affirmative action policies. Are they working? Are the right groups benefiting? You need data for that. Plus, they argue it gives a deeper understanding of India's social fabric.
Any constitutional basis cited?
Yes, they often point to Article 340 of the Constitution, which talks about appointing a commission to investigate the conditions of socially and educationally backward classes. Data helps identify those classes.
Okay, that makes a strong case for the why. What about the con side? What are the main worries or objections?
The biggest concern, perhaps, is that it could actually make social divisions worse. That counting people by caste reinforces caste identities, potentially hindering that long-term goal of a casteless society.
So it could backfire, essentially. Solidify the very thing some hope to overcome.
That's the fear. There are also worries about political misuse parties using the data purely for electoral gain, playing caste politics. Then there are the practical challenges. Defining and classifying thousands of castes and subcastes accurately is still a massive administrative headache. We saw that in 2011.
Right, the 4.6 million variations problem hasn't magically disappeared.
Exactly. Plus, concerns about breaching that 50% reservation cap set by the Supreme Court, the sheer cost of the exercise, the risk of stirring up social tensions and conflict, and of course, ethical and privacy concerns about collecting such sensitive personal data on a mass scale.
Those are some very significant counter-arguments. You mentioned the 50% reservation cap. Let's touch on the legal side of this. How does the Constitution and the Supreme Court fit in?
Several constitutional articles are relevant. Articles 15 and 16 on non-discrimination and equality of opportunity are key. Article 340 we mentioned. Article 335 relates to SC/ST claims in public services.
And the Supreme Court's role?
Hugely important, especially the Indrasani case in 1992. That's where the court laid down the 50% ceiling on total reservations.
The 50% cap.
Yes, and critically, the court also stressed the need for quantifiable data to justify reservations for backward classes. So in a way, the court itself created a need for the kind of data a caste census could provide.
Interesting. So the push for data is partly linked to satisfying legal requirements set by the court itself.
To some extent, yes, though the 50% cap itself is a major constraint.
Has that cap ever been breached?
The court said exceptions could be made in extraordinary circumstances. Some states, like Tamil Nadu, for instance, have reservations exceeding 50%, often protected by specific legislation. But these are frequently subject to legal challenges. Telangana's recent move also goes beyond 50%.
And we already saw the state surveys facing legal challenges.
Right, about whether states even have the power to conduct them. It's almost certain the National Caste Census will face legal challenges too, probably on various grounds: methodology, privacy, the potential impact on the 50% cap.
And you'd expect demands to raise that cap once the data comes out.
Absolutely. Leaders like Tejaswi Yadav in Bihar have already called for removing the 50% ceiling based on the state survey results showing a large OBC-EBC population. The national data could amplify those calls significantly.
So looking ahead, what are the big picture implications? Socially, politically, economically, and the challenges?
Well, socio-economically, the potential is there for much more targeted development programs. Reshaping affirmative action based on solid, current data. That's the positive spin.
But the flip side?
The risk of increased social tension is very real, politically. It's likely to profoundly impact party strategies, how alliances are formed, even how candidates are chosen. Caste calculations could become even more central.
Any opportunities?
Yes, updating population estimates for various groups, which are probably quite outdated now, and maybe an opportunity to finally create a more standardized national list of castes, which could reduce some confusion.
But the challenges remain huge.
Definitely. Ensuring data accuracy and standardization that's paramount, preventing misuse of the data, addressing those tricky ethical and privacy concerns, and crucially, managing public expectations and potential anxieties through really good outreach and communication.
It sounds like getting this right requires incredible care and planning. What would be some key recommendations for making this work effectively and responsibly?
Well, first, developing that standardized national caste list needs to happen through really wide consultation. It can't be imposed top-down without issues.
Okay.
Then, ironclad data security and privacy protocols are non-negotiable. People need to trust how their information is handled.
Absolutely.
Thorough training for the enumerators is critical, especially with the digital methods and the sensitivity of the caste question. Transparency throughout the whole process, the collection, processing, analysis is key.
Maybe some kind of independent oversight.
Establishing something like a parliamentary oversight committee could be a good idea for accountability. And ultimately, the goal should be to use the data constructively for targeted welfare, evidence-based revision of reservation policies, not just for political point scoring.
So wrapping this up,
Yeah.
we've journeyed from the colonial censuses through the post-independence pause, the SECC experiment, the recent state surveys, and now this major decision for a national caste count in 2025.
It's a decision freighted with history and carrying immense potential to reshape India's social and political landscape. For better or worse, or likely, a complex mix of both.
The data, when it comes, will fuel debates for years, won't it?
Without a doubt, it will force a reckoning with existing policies and potentially redraw political lines.
So a final thought then for you listening. Considering everything we've discussed, the history, the complexities, the potential impacts, both positive and negative, what single aspect of this upcoming caste census do you think might be the most transformative for India? And maybe, what big questions does this whole thing raise for you about the future path of social justice and equality in the country?
Yeah, definitely a lot to think about.
It really is. We hope this deep dive has given you a clearer picture of this very significant development and the many layers involved.